2025 is upon us. And this, my friends, this is the year. This is the year you make your Polish language learning dreams come true. All we need is a year. By this time in 2026, you will be able to understand and communicate in Polish. Are you considering learning Polish but hesitate when you repeatedly hear that Polish language is one of the most difficult languages in the world? My message in this video is to ignore that statement. Press Ctrl-Alt-Delete on that statement and start learning the Polish language today. If you become impervious to the myth that Polish is one of the most difficult languages, an entire new world will open up before you. Hey everybody, my name's William, I'm from the US, and on this channel I talk about my experience as an American living in Poland and learning the Polish language. Now before I moved from my home state of Arkansas to Poland, I had several people tell me, look Will, you won't be able to learn the Polish language, it's simply too difficult. But now, years later, my American wife and I both know Polish. Now I can't exactly say that learning Polish was a walk in the park for us. But to be honest, it was easier than expected, especially when we found the methods that worked for us. And when it comes to language learning, my wife and I aren't exactly the sharpest tools in the shed. Both of us struggled to retain any knowledge of the Spanish language after taking years of Spanish in middle and high school. So is Polish really the hardest language out there? I don't think so. For me, Polish is easier than Spanish. I think a lot of Poles take pride in this statement that, oh, Polish is the most difficult language in the world, or one of the most difficult. And I don't want to take that away from them. I'm sorry, Polish people on my channel. But what they may not realize is that when they repeat this thing that Polish is the most difficult language in the world, they're actually discouraging some people from even making an effort to try to learn the language. Because why would someone even start learning the language if just when they are starting to delve into all things Polish, to fall in love with Polish culture, they hear they don't even have a shot. They don't even stand a chance. Why would they even bother? I gotta admit, when people repeatedly told me I wouldn't be able to learn the language, I almost believed them. Almost! But thankfully, I'm pretty stubborn and trusted my gut that it was worth it to give it a try. So again, you have to become immune to this statement that Polish is the hardest language in the world. Let that silly declaration roll off you like water off a duck's back. Because let me tell you this, Polish is definitely not the hardest language for Ukrainians or Belarusians or native speakers of other Slavic languages. No, for them it's relatively easy to get a handle on Polish. Of course, this Polish language learning journey is going to present some challenges for English native speakers. There are 7 hellish grammatical cases. The conjugations and declensions will at times blow your mind. People like to make a big fuss about the pronunciation, which at times can be a little insane. Oh, even after years of learning Polish, I admit that pronouncing some words is still a little difficult for me. Szczęścia, szczęścia, szczęścia. Wstrząs, wstrząs. Dźbło, dźbło. Chrząszcz, chrząszcz. God damn it. But I swear, these hurdles will pale in comparison to the great joy you will feel when you start understanding the language, when you start reading books in Polish literature, when you start having meaningful conversations in Polish. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I'm going to give you some tips for learning the Polish language that worked wonders for me. These are all based on my own experience. Now, of course, I realize that every language learner has their own preferences, methods, approaches, but if you're interested in how I personally came to start understanding and speaking the language, I am excited to share these tips. I believe that if you consistently make an effort to engage in these learning activities, it's highly likely that come January 2026, you're gonna look up and say, o kurczę, udało mi się, dałem sobie radę, mówię płynnie po polsku. I did it! I speak fluent Polish! By the way, these language learning tips also work for those of you on my channel learning English, or any other language for that matter. And for those of you learning English and want to learn some of the colloquial and slang phrases I'm using right now as I speak to you, I'm going to put the definitions of some of those phrases in the description below this video. Tip number 1, prioritize listening to the language. Listen to as much Polish as you can during this year. If you're a complete beginner, find an audio course that allows you to start small and then build a base, build a foundation. On this channel, I've mentioned umpteen times the site realpolish.pl. This is the site that changed my life and taught me the Polish language. The website's founder, Piotr, created audio courses that, if used correctly, will get the Polish language in your head. This is the course, this is the site that changed my life and taught me how to understand and how to read in Polish. And specifically, it's the beginner and intermediate materials that are what changed the game for me. The course consisted of 365 simple stories, one for every day of the year. And for each story, you got an MP3 audio file and a PDF transcript. The stories themselves were about 3-4 minutes long, and I listened to these stories as many times as I possibly could in the course of a day and over the course of a year. When I was doing the dishes, when I was commuting to and from work, you better believe I had my earphones in. The whole time I was listening to short stories, fables, and legends in Polish. And when I had a moment to sit down at my desk, I would listen to the audio files and read the PDF transcripts simultaneously. I can testify that no matter what level you're at, repeated reading and listening will help you understand how to pronounce these ominous-looking Polish words. In my case, it was when I started reading the text along with the audio that spelling and pronunciation finally started to make sense. Okay, so there's realpolish.pl. I really recommend that course. And besides that, you may want to check out Link. That's Steve Kaufman's language learning platform. He has a lot of really great resources for beginner and intermediate learners of Polish. Specifically, I would recommend you go through all of the mini stories. They start off really easy and get progressively harder, but those stories, if you repeat that over the course of a year or even half a year, that's going to do wonders for your Polish. Listen to these stories every day, repeatedly. Listen to the same file 2 times, 5 times. Listen to these stories on walks with your doggos. Listen to them while you're driving your car to and from work. Hell, if you and your spouse are having an argument, take one earbud, put it like this, put your hand like this, and while your significant other is handing you your ass in this ear, listen to Polish in this ear. Just go like this. If you hold your hand like this, it'll look like you're concentrating on the quarrel at hand, but in fact, you are enhancing your Polish listening skills. Okay, tip number 2. So use your beginning and intermediate learning materials as much as you can, but make sure, and this is key, to engage with content that is too difficult for you. Content that is currently out of your league. For me, this engaging with language learning resources that are kind of too difficult for me, this is kluczowe. This is key to achieving success. Sure, at the beginning you should be listening to and reading as much content for beginners as possible. That's the priority. But I would also recommend dipping your toes into something that's more authentic, something that's more exciting, something that's definitely kind of out of reach of your current level of comprehension, but that is going to pay off in the long run. Find content made for native speakers of Polish that interests you. Perhaps a podcast or a YouTube channel related to one of your hobbies. Maybe you want to watch soccer matches in Polish. Perhaps even an audiobook. So listen to your beginner and intermediate content every day, but be sure to supplement that at least a little bit with these challenging yet highly rewarding materials. Personally, I've found that this technique helps keep my motivation up. It reminds me why I'm learning the language in the first place. After all, I'm listening to these short stories, to these kind of boring stories for beginner and intermediate learners, so I can get to the next level of comprehension. Do I really for a whole year want to be listening to some stories about how John went to the store, bought groceries, and made himself a dinner? No, I want to be watching videos in Polish on YouTube about travel, about language learning, about running. So when you do engage with these more difficult materials, remember to take it easy on yourself. Don't get frustrated if you don't understand everything. Of course you're not going to understand everything. Instead, focus on what you do understand. And if you come across some interesting words that intrigue you, go ahead and take note of them, look them up afterwards. And most importantly, give yourself credit. Give yourself a pat on the back for venturing into the unknown. And just think about it. If you are consistently using your beginner and intermediate material, but all the while exposing yourself to native speaker level content, you're exposing yourself to new words, to colloquial expressions, to grammatical constructions, and all the while you are working wonders for your Polish level. And all of this combined will bring your Polish to a whole other level. Okay, the third and last tip is to start speaking Polish. I think it's really important to start speaking the language when you feel ready. When I was learning Polish on my own in the US, I spent I think an entire year trying to get the language in my head before I ever started taking language lessons with tutors. Was a year too long to wait? Honestly, I think I could have gotten started a little bit sooner, but I do think it's important to choose the moment when you're ready to start converting that passive knowledge of the language into active use, to choose the moment when you start engaging with tutors and native speakers of the language. I was using the language learning platform italki, italki.com, which is a language learning platform that allows you to find tutors for any language you're learning. I still use that platform regularly. I take language lessons both in Polish and in the other languages I'm learning, and I also occasionally give English classes on that site. But italki isn't the only language learning platform like that out there. There's Preply, and I'm sure 100 other ones that are similar. And if you don't want to pay to practice the language, you can use language exchange applications or websites like Tandem to meet conversation partners. But I think it's important to remember that whether you're meeting with tutors or whether you're practicing with conversation partners, that you need to be clear about your language learning goals. Tell them up front how you want to practice the things you want to work on. At this point, what's most important is to put into practice all the things you've been working on your own. So for example, if you recently listened to an interesting podcast in Polish, try explaining what you learned about to your teacher or conversation partner. Of course it's going to be a bit uncomfortable, maybe a bit awkward, but this is what really counts. This is where you convert that passive knowledge of Polish, what you understood, into active use of the language. Another idea is if you need help with your pronunciation, you could read some of the beginner or intermediate stories from real Polish and ask your tutor or conversation partner to correct you. Just remember that whenever you're ready to start speaking, it's important to make speaking a regular habit. The more practice you get speaking, the more confident you will feel each time. There you have it. Hopefully these tips are pretty straightforward. Listen to and read beginner and intermediate content that gives you a good base. Consume challenging content that is beyond your current level to inspire and motivate you. Speak the language and make connections with Polish speakers. If you make a habit of these 3 items this year, in January 2026, you're going to look up and realize that you understand and speak Polish. Please leave me a comment about why you're learning Polish or what your language learning goals for this year are. A powodzenie życzę w nauce. W nauce nie jednego z najtrudniejszych języków świata, ale w nauce jednego z najpiękniejszych języków świata. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time, and Happy New Year.